This is the Mile High Five podcast with Carl Jensen and Doug Cunnington. We have authentic conversations about the journey to FI, health, happiness, and some very odd tangents. We interview FI experts, side hustlers, people on their way to FI, and those who have reached the other side. Join us every week, and if you want the show notes and links and all that other stuff, head over to milehighfi.com.
Hello, world. Welcome to the Mile High Five podcast. I'm Carl Jensen with my co-host.
I'm Doug Cunnington.
And we have a very special guest and neighbor. He happens to be our neighbor. Tell us who you are and what you do.
My name's Jake. I make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for a living, and I live here in Longmont with you guys.
So that is a confusing answer, and I would like to talk about it. And the confusing part is the making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So if you heard that, you would think perhaps Jake works at a deli or a restaurant or something like that. I won't say where Jake actually works at, but what he actually does is he works on machines that make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and I'll leave it at that. But when I first heard about Jake's job, I thought, man, that is so cool. He works on these big machines. And to back up a second, as a kid, I always loved machines. I had this book called How Things Are Made. I still have it, which detailed how like a 747 is made, how cookies are made, and all these things. And I still read it. I've had this book for 40 years. So I'll back up a second and tell a story that Jake's heard about 500 times. And I probably won't tell it after this because you've heard it so many times. But I've got a friend, I was out in San Diego, and I've got a friend named John who used to work for the Predator drone program. And those are weaponized drones that I don't know what they do with them. They shoot projectiles and kill people. Anyway, John's like, hey, yeah, so I work for this Predator drone thing. I know you're kind of a tech guy. If you ever want to see like where I work, I can't show you everything, but I could get you in there and you could see some stuff. I'm like, man, that sounds super awesome. I'd love to do that, John. Thank you so much. And then I've got this other friend, Curtis, who works for another defense contractor. And he's like, we're having a launch in Florida. It's going to be 2023 or 2024, depending on when we get the satellite done. But if you'd like to come out for this launch, I could get you into the private, like VIP area. I'm going to be there and we can take like a guest. So if I know how much you're into that stuff, if you want to do that, you can come with me and see it. I'm like, oh my God, Curtis, that is a bucket list item to see a launch and to see it up close. I will totally, whatever's going on there, I will cancel it and be there. And then, as you both know, recently I went down to Austin to see the opening of the Tesla factory. And that was pretty cool. We got to see all the robots, and Elon Musk was there. Like Elon Musk was 50 feet away from me, the richest person in the world. So that was cool. So anyway, where I'm going with all of this is when Jake told me about his job, I'm like, you know, Jake, that's really cool. I'd really like to see these machines that make the food. That sounds awesome. And Jake is like, yeah, I'm sorry. I can't get you in there. Off limits for you. I'm like, but it's okay, Jake. I still love you.
Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. It's top secret information. I can't divulge how we do it.
Top secret, more secret than Predator drones, rockets, and defense satellites, and the Tesla factory, but it's okay. Let's get into our interview. So I was listening to another interview you did recently, Jake, and this was the Bigger Pockets Money interview with my wife. And you said one thing on there that kind of stuck with me, and I want to delve into it a little bit more. You said that initially you thought the stock market was scary. You feared it. Are you still that way? And if not, what changed your mind?
No, I'm not that way anymore. That was my initial thought after graduating college. I was scared of it. I didn't understand it. I knew what stocks were. I had a basic understanding, but to me, it wasn't tangible. And that's really what scared me from it. I couldn't control it. So when I graduated, even before graduating college, I bought my first house, and that was tangible. I knew what I was investing in. I knew what I could do to it to fix it up. And I knew the value that I was, investing in. Versus the stock market was me putting my money somewhere electronically and never, not understanding it. So that was big and scary to me. But a couple years later, when we were moving out of our first house, selling it, we had all of our college debt paid off and our car loan paid off. We had a big lump sum from the house because we did make good money on it. And we also had more income that we were not putting away for our debt anymore. So we didn't know what to do with our money. And that's kind of what got me started on looking up personal investing and things like that, Google searching it. I ended up finding a podcast, Brandon's Mad Fientist podcast, which was really what got me to understand what personal finance is and the whole financial independence thing. But that kind of got me jump started to research it. And what it came down to was the S&P 500 and index funds and starting to understand that. And it was at that point, after reading a few articles, a book or two, a no-brainer to invest in. And I felt safe, much better about putting my money there instead of letting too much money sit in a savings account that was making zero, essentially.
And at the time that we're recording this, there was recently a stock market dip. So luckily you could fill in the gap almost any time that will apply. And I mean, it's fairly significant. So how do you view it when there is a downturn?
Yeah, like a lot of people in this community, it's stocks are on sale when there's a downturn. Any money I'm putting in is for the long term. I've got two accounts. I've got what we have invested in our 401ks, 457s, and retirement funds. And that to me is, I'm never touching that until I'm 60, 65, 70, whenever I need to start touching that. I've also got a post-tax fund. And that is a place to park my money. And if I need it someday to invest in something, I can pull it out easily. But when I have extra money and I see the stock market turn down, I just put more in because I know the upside is there. And hopefully when I need the money, it's there, but it's not money that I'm ever looking to grab at a whim.
And quick follow-up. So one thing that I've said on the podcast, and I've taken some heat for it, is that I very rarely at this point contribute to retirement accounts. And we stopped for several years, I think back in maybe like 2015-ish or so. And then, I mean, we do have Roth accounts and we do have traditional IRAs or 401ks. And then we also have the post-tax brokerage account, which it sounds like you're doing as well. So number one, do you max, and feel free to skip this question if you don't want to answer it, but do you max out your your pre-tax accounts? And then is there some ratio between sort of the three buckets of each of those that you aim towards?
Yes, we max out pre-tax. My wife is a teacher, so she has access to a 457, which if you don't know what that is, quick overview, is just like a 401k, except you can access that money at any time with zero penalty. You can pull it out at any time with zero penalty, but you still pay tax on it. So that's a nice little bucket for us where I feel like, at any time we can pull from. So we max both of those out, whatever depending on the year, every year it bumps up a little bit, but we max out a 457 and a 401k. They're always the same max, 19.5 or whatever it is now. We also have an HSA health account where we max that out at the $7,000 a year. So that's a minimum for us. And that's kind of how the tax deferred. Anything beyond that, I like to save money in a bank account. Too much is in our bank account, but I do real estate, which I think we'll get into. So for purchasing houses, I've been buying about a house a year for a while, and I try to set enough cash aside to get that down payment. And then as the year goes on, if I feel my account's getting too high for comfort, that's when I transfer to the post-tax brokerage.
Got it. Okay. Well, you mentioned rental properties. Can you talk about what you have going on? It sounds like you've been doing it for a little while, so you can take us back to the beginning, I guess.
Yeah, beginning started in 2014. Actually, we had already moved for my company, for a couple times, and I actually had a sister-in-law who was looking for a place to rent. We were looking for something to invest in, and we ended up working with her, and we picked a house together. My wife and I bought it, and she's still living in it today. So that was kind of my first dabble in a rental property. Very easy because I knew I had a tenant. I knew what they were going to pay. I knew what I was paying for the house. So it really lowered that threshold, in my opinion, and that's what broke the barrier and led us into that. It took another 4 years to get a second rental property. But after that, since 2018, I've bought one a year. So we have 6 rental properties now. And that is, at this point, supplementing our income to the point where we could both leave our day jobs and be happy with the income we have from rental properties.
Cool. And if you, again, feel comfortable, you could punt any of the questions. How old are you?
33.
Okay. That was no follow-ups. I just
okay.
wanted.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. Yeah. Numbers, I jotted down a few numbers because cool. I'm really bad with them. So if I don't know it, I can't say it. But I jotted down a few numbers just in case they come up because I'm happy to share anything.
Cool.
Right on. And you've fixed up a lot of these properties. So you're a DIYer. I think our lives have had similar paths where I remember you were telling Mindy, my wife, that you were doing live-in flips. You just didn't know it. You didn't know there was a name to it.
Right. So my first house I bought in Toledo, Ohio, it was a foreclosure, and I mentioned it right before we started here. You could smell the house 3 doors down because they had dogs that were never let out, and the inside just reeked of, anything dogs do inside when they're not let out all day. So that was my first house. And again, it was a tangible asset that I bought, and I knew I did all the work from the flooring through the roof, replaced 20 sheets of plywood and all the fascia board, and did it all pretty much myself with a little help from family. So we did that, moved to Kentucky for the family, or with the family for the job, and then did a lot of market research down there and found the right house in the right neighborhood. I knew I'd have to move again for the company, so I bought with intention. I wanted something under value that when I move in a couple years, I could at least, my goal was always to break even. But fast forward a little bit, 3 houses later, I was always making anywhere from 10 to 30% on these houses that we were buying and moving for the company. So that it was by happenstance that we ended up doing the live-in flips, and then moving out to Colorado. We did it with more intent, and have done fairly well in Colorado. And we actually didn't buy and sell, but we bought one and then bought a second, and we're renting out our first, and values have increased a lot, somewhat because of the market, but also because of the way we've bought them.
Cool. So one question I have, and I think both of us are at a little bit of an advantage because we were both brought up working with our hands. We both had dads. I know my dad was in the trades. I think your dad was more of a hands-on type of person. Yeah. So when I write about live-in flips or talk to people about them, people who weren't brought up that way or are intimidated always say, "Oh, I could never do that. Like, this is so impressive." What would you say to someone who has that attitude?
Yeah, you're right. We both, sounds like we had the same advantage of never having a contractor in our house, and Dad was always doing the work, and we were right alongside. So, but if you didn't have that, I wouldn't be scared of it. Actually, talking about peanut butter and jelly, it reminds me of something we did. I don't know if it was middle school, high school science class, but we were instructed to write instructions on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And we were graded on how someone could follow those instructions, and they were to follow them to a T. So if you said, take the knife and spread jelly on bread, you might have someone take a knife and spread jelly on the bread that is still in the bag. So you had to be explicit with your directions on take the bread out of the bag and follow, and make sure you write step by step as if anyone can follow it, not knowing what a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is. So that question kind of reminds me of that, where DIY, I think most common household tasks, a lot of even remodeling, anyone can do if you can follow directions. And with YouTube and Google, if you can look it up, if you can, start small, start with a drain that might need to be fixed, or something small, a clog drain, even something that there's little risk of failure. If you fail, you just call a plumber, or if you fail, you call in a contractor. Start very small maintenance type items. Don't start with electricity, but work your way up to it. And there's more complicated jobs like tile that take. I've done thousands of square feet of tile, and I still screw it up sometimes. And there's things that I'm not happy with. But what I will say is, the first tile job I ever did, there were certain things that bugged me every day that I looked at it, but I also did it, and there was a sense of pride there. So, now I look at other people's tile jobs and I judge them because I've done so much of it. And I, just because I'm very conscious of my work, I can do a better job than most contractors because I'm taking my time, I'm following explicit directions. And so I'd say someone that's scared of DIY type work, just start small and do 3 hours of research for a 20-minute job. But there's a lot of gratification once you do that 20-minute job instead of paying someone to do it.
Yeah, now I'm going to be intimidated whenever you're over at our house. I just did tile in the basement. I don't know if you saw that, but I think I'm going to close the door and not let you in there because now I feel self-conscious. But that's a great answer, that right instruction exercise. We should do something like that. Like maybe go to the bathroom and see how it goes. We each can follow each other's instructions. And
what a mess.
Yeah,
it would turn out to be.
Yeah, you didn't unzip your pants.
So, Jake, you mentioned a little bit of a mistake with some of the early tile. Any jobs that you have taken on, especially the early ones, where it went sideways, there was a mistake? certainly you learned from it. You're like, I'm not going to do that again. And if nothing comes to mind, that's okay. Maybe it'll come up later.
Yeah, I can't think of a disaster per se, but I could probably nitpick every job that I've done and tell you what I can do better. And it's something that I've tried to do in the past, is do a write-up of what I do, because being an engineer and very conscious of, I spend hours planning and doing research. And what I'll do is I'll take 2 or 3 different methods and combine them into my own. And then once I do it, I go back and I criticize it and I figure out, next time this is what I'm going to change. Speaking of tile, it's kind of the one where I get, I did a tile kitchen and there was a lip on one of the tiles. And every evening when I pulled my chair out for dinner, it would catch on that lip. Every day that was a reminder. I did a custom tile shower and there was a little divot in one area that always had a small pool of water. Things like that, which are not noticeable to most. Those are the little mistakes. Big mistakes, I've screwed things up. I've woke up in the middle of the night to water flowing full flow out of a 1/2-inch pipe that burst that I had just done that day in the basement. Luckily, it wasn't a finished basement and it just all went in a drain. So plumbing is something, when you're doing real live plumbing, you can screw it up pretty bad and end up with a lot of rework. But that's probably one of the bigger disasters, but it was averted. I lost a couple tools that were under the pipe, but other than that, no real damage.
Not too bad. Yeah. So how do you balance between real estate and stocks? It sounded like early on, real estate was more approachable, and then you started to dive in other areas. So how do you view it now?
Yeah, I think I've described a little over the years how it's changed, and it continues to change. The approach that I mentioned, where we invest in our 401ks still, and put a little over $50,000 total towards pre-tax money every year, and then everything else goes towards either real estate or a post-tax brokerage. I'd say my split right now is of our assets. We've probably got 1/3 in real estate and 2/3 split between our 401ks and post-tax, just in terms of value. But this is why I jotted down numbers. We've invested over $450,000 in real estate, but there's a $1.6 million value there. So looking at the current market value of all of our houses and what we have invested, we're doing very well with investing what we have.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. And this kind of transitions to the next question. I heard you say something once. You said it wasn't the best use of your money to pay off your mortgage, so you definitely make use of leverage. You leverage. I'll be here all week. How do you think about leverage, and what would you tell to someone who is afraid of that? It's a popular thing in the personal finance community to say, I really need to pay off my house. I'm going to pay down my mortgage as fast as possible just because I'm so averse to debt.
I'd say I did the same thing, and I felt the same way. And I ended up our third house when we lived in Ohio for the second time. We were able to actually pay cash for the house. It was such a dump, but that it was cheap. But also because we had invested so much in our real estate, and we were doubling our mortgage payment at one point, just because we had extra money. And that was what was tangible to me to pay off my mortgage. So it really accelerated our income, or not our income, but our availability to do things with money. And so the bank wouldn't lend on the house because it was not inhabitable according to their appraiser. So we had to pay cash, and we were able to do that because of the situation we put ourselves in with real estate, with paying off our mortgage. But after that house, moving out to Colorado, we sold that house for a very healthy profit. And I took out every penny I could on a mortgage in Colorado. Houses are more expensive, and I could have put a lot more down, but I wanted to leverage. I think I got a little smarter over the years and realized if the bank's going to lend me money at 3%, I'll take every penny they'll give me. But that being said, that's where I'm at right now. I want to leverage everything I can. I still do have one rental property we own outright. We don't have a mortgage on, which is a huge comfort because we make quite a bit of money not having a mortgage. It's a lot of income on that property. And then in the future, I'd love to be in a position as these properties continue to cash flow and I slow down with buying, I will pay them down because I hope to put myself in a financial position that, yes, it doesn't make sense to pay off these houses, but financially, I can run the numbers all day, all night. I can never justify paying off a house. But if I'm in a financial position where I don't need to compare that 3% loan rate to an 8% return on the stock market, I'd rather just pay off that loan and be a little bit more comfortable.
Yep.
Cool.
And do you have a goal for the number of properties or doors that you want to have? It sounds like you were pretty aggressively, would you say one per year or so?
It's been one per year for the past few years. So we're at 6 rentals plus our seventh is our primary residence. My goal is 4. So now we have 6. That was my second goal. And I think 6 is a great number of where I'd want to be in terms of long-term. 6, we cash flow plenty of money on those. I don't want to manage much more. I self-manage all of my properties, and they're mostly very easy, which is great. I do a lot of work screening my tenants, which I have to draft a lease today for the most recent house I bought, and really happy with the tenant that I'm selecting. Hopefully it goes well. But I think 6 is a great number. Likely, though, I will buy another 1 or 2 over the next couple of years because I really enjoy it. I like looking for the properties, and I don't do social media. I don't, scroll much online, but I'm on Zillow every day, just looking at houses, looking at things. So my plan would be to maybe acquire a couple more over the next couple of years and then tone it back and maybe sell off a few to select the 6 that I think are the most profitable or the most viable long-term properties.
Okay. And I want to switch gears a little bit here. You mentioned you found mad scientist Brandon a while back. Do you remember when that was? And that was your entry into the FI community. Can you talk about the journey and who you followed along the way?
Yes. That was 2013, actually, when I was moving to Kentucky, when I discovered Brandon. And it was a long time before I really got too deep into the community. And I think, it was a lot younger then than it is now, less established, less people to follow. And then I forget when Choose FI started, but I started listening to them when they were 10 or 15 episodes in. I had a friend that said, hey, you like this kind of thing. Maybe you'd like this podcast. So I started listening to Choose FI for a long time. And that really, I got super excited about them because they brought the community together, in my opinion. They did a really nice job of that. And just listening to them, I couldn't talk at work about the whole financial independence or anything like that. I couldn't talk to family. My friends weren't interested. I don't even, not even the financial independence. I just like to talk about money, real estate, those types of things. So after discovering Choose FI, I kind of rode on that for a long time. Fast forward another couple years, moving out to Colorado, moved here to Longmont for my job. And someone said, oh, you're moving to Longmont. That's where Mr. Money Mustache lives. And I said, who? So still after 5 years of knowing what, fire was, I still didn't know who Pete was. So instantly started reading some of his stuff and, read a ton of his blogs and everything and really liked his writing, moved out here, found a meetup for Brandon the Mad Scientist, and who again got me into this space. I thought there was a meetup for him down in Denver, so I went just to meet him because I thought, oh, that's cool. I was on meetup.com and I saw that. I'm going to go meet him, and that's how I met Carl.
In Proper City, I remember.
Yep.
Okay, that's pretty cool. And is it fair to say you're more of a podcast listener than a blog reader, and that's why you didn't run into Pete's stuff first? Yeah,
that definitely. I'm all audio. Even my books, I love to read, but mostly audiobooks just because I'm always up and doing something. I never sit in front of a computer or sit on my phone. So there are some blogs I like to try to pull up and read occasionally, but definitely more audio.
Okay, cool.
Okay, let's transition to exercise and health, and I've got a much shorter story to tell you about this. Jake is one of the healthiest people I know, and he happens to live about a mile away from me, maybe a little bit less. So one day I was out front or looking out my window, and I see Jake running, and he's hauling ass. He's probably running at least 2x what I run, and that's not saying much because I'm a slow runner, but he was also pushing 2 children at the time. So Jake is in super shape. Another one I remember when we went out to up into the mountains, and I remember we were partying a little bit the night before, and kind of rough shape. And I'm in the elevator going down, and you came in, and it was snowing. There was like a blizzard. You're like, yeah, I just ran a 10K or something like that. I'm like, God, I can barely function, and you've already ran a 10K. Like, what the hell's going on here?
And I have basically the same story from Austin. I barely got out of bed, and Jake runs past me. Well, I saw some dude running towards me. I'm like, man, that guy is ripped, and he's hauling ass. And I'm like, oh, it's Jake, who we were sharing a room. And he's like, yeah, I just ran 10 miles. I went to the end of the river walk over here, and then went to the other side. So Go ahead. Sorry, I derailed the story. The guy could run fast.
Yeah, he can run super fast. So what is your routine?
So I've kind of developed this one over the past couple of years, and I've always been a runner. Running's my passion since middle school, and I could run 7 days a week if my body could handle it. But I've had too many stress fractures really to count. Even I've had that many, and I've had I've had IT band syndrome. I've had I've torn a quad. I've had too many injuries. And so I realized looking forward the next 10, 20, 30 years, running's not a viable thing to do 6-7 days a week. I certainly can, but my body clearly doesn't handle it well. So what I've developed is I still run 3 days a week at least, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. I lift and do yoga on Mondays and Fridays. And then Wednesdays and Sundays, I cross train, which is usually biking or hiking. So I've kind of, I think I've got a good balance, and usually I'm active 7 days a week. If I miss a day because I have planned, I work out 7 days a week. If I miss a day, I don't have to make it up because it's probably good to miss a day here and there. And I try to balance it so I'm not working the same muscles every day. And but when I do miss more than one day, a couple of days, my wife yells at me and says, go for a run, because I got too much pent up energy. And I do, it's kind of a lifestyle of mine now, and I really need it to ground myself.
Nice. I didn't see the yoga part coming. What got you into that? And do you watch the DVD, or what is your yoga practice?
So yeah, that one is a fairly new one. My wife long ago used to ask me to do yoga, and I would do it occasionally and say, well, that was dumb. That's not even a workout. Really didn't care for it at all. So like I said, I'm a runner. I don't stretch. No, most runners don't care to stretch, and they just go out, run, come home, and they're done. And I'm the same way. So really what got me into it is more stretching than anything. And just to, do a quick 20-minute yoga session is what I do after I lift. And shout out to Peloton Yoga, because that's my wife has the Peloton, and now we do the spinning on a cheap bike, and we just pay for the app. So it's only $10 a month, and they've got really good yoga classes too. So it's something that I've come to appreciate over the years. Complete 180 from saying yoga is garbage a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Doug, are you still doing that hot naked yoga or whatever that cult was you were involved with downtown?
I'm trying to. Okay. I mainly hang out in the viewing area. There's a whole viewing thing. So
got it.
Yeah, you'll have to join me. I got a guest pass.
I'll wait, do you actually want me to do the yoga while you watch? That would be kind of creepy.
Either way, whatever you're most comfortable with.
None of the above.
Sounds like a business opportunity there. Free yoga and $30 to watch every 10 minutes. You could.
Yeah, that's right.
Jake, I think we're onto something.
That is a good business idea. Okay. So I'm curious about your weight training sort of routine. Can you talk a little bit more? Do you go to a gym? What kind of exercises do you do? Reps, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's something that develops continuously. I am a proponent of heavy lifting. I've always been stemming from my running days. High rep, low weight is what I've always done. And just through, hearing some of the research and everything, I think that the heavier weights are key. Yet I lift in my basement because I'm up early working out every morning, and I don't want to go to a gym. So I've got up to 50-pound dumbbells. So I do anything I can do with up to 50-pound dumbbells, which for some stuff is plenty. But for other things, like a lot of leg lifts, deadlifts, even bench press, it's just not enough. So I end up going higher reps there. I'm a member at the headquarters HQ here. So whenever I'm there, I try to get some deadlifts and some good bench pressing in just to do the heavier weights. But really, on my normal workouts at home, I'm doing higher reps just because of the equipment I have to work with. And I just don't have the space to invest in heavier weights and Olympic type dumbbells or barbells.
Gotcha. And then when you say low reps, like how many are you doing? Like 3 to 5 or something?
Low reps for me is probably 6 to 8.
Okay.
So if I'm doing heavy deadlifts or heavier weightlifting, it's 6 to 8 would be what I go for. Because when I'm doing that, I'm usually alone, so I don't have a spot. I think if I'm trying to bench and I'm only doing 3 reps, there's too much weight on that bar, and I'll end up having to drop the weights.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. And then Carl, just curious about because you lift some leg stuff at HQ, right?
Yes.
So what, are you doing the same kind of low reps, or what are you doing?
I've I used to do that, but now I go more towards high reps. And for a couple of reasons, I've heard that's better for hypertrophy. So low reps is better for strength. And I'm kind of vain, so I'd rather have the size over the strength.
Get that booty going, right?
Yeah.
That's what you were telling me earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Does it look any? Do you want to check it out now? Or?
We'll do after.
Okay.
After.
And the other thing is, I think with the high reps, I'm less likely to get injured.
Okay.
So lower weight, more reps.
Yep, that's. I actually tore my shoulder a little over a year ago because I was pushing it a little too hard with the heavier weights. So that also for the last year and a half or so, I've gone much lighter weight because of that. That's what happens when you only get to lift heavy weights occasionally and not consistently. I get a little overzealous and push the weight too much, and that happened.
Yeah, it's tough. Well, and, I'm asking because we listen to a lot of the same podcasts, and they're like, yeah, lower weights, and it's like the optimal way to do stuff. But there's all these constraints or existing injuries or whatever. And it's like, I don't have big enough plates, or I'm just using dumbbells or whatever. And you can't do anything different because we don't have like the full Olympic set of weights that they have at their university where they're doing all the research, So I've been trying to lift heavier weights, but the same struggles that you guys are talking about, like maybe not the right weight plates or whatever, or injury, or honestly, half the time I'm just like, it's so heavy.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do something.
Well, and when I do that, I talking about specific lifts, I like full body, full functional type lifts. And when I get to do deadlifts, that's one of my, so I read a couple years ago, the hex bar deadlift utilizes 95% of your skeletal muscles. It is the single best lift you can do for your body. And the guy that did all this research, he can also predict the 40 times for NFL athletes, judging by their deadlift, hex bar deadlift. So if whatever their 1 rep max is, he can predict their 40 time down to like the 10th of a second. He has super high accuracy doing this. So that's one where, okay, I can lift weight in benching and some back exercises, shoulder exercises, all of that. But when I get the opportunity, like Sunday, Carl and I went to look at a place on Main Street, and once he left, I ran to the back of headquarters and did, a couple reps of deadlifts just to load up the weight as much as I can. And I'm still sore from it from 2 days ago. Yeah. Just because that is one where I feel like you can find that balance of certain lifts are going to be great for your body and go heavy, because that's what they say as you age too. That's what really helps keep your skeleton strong. And a lot of, again, engaging 95% of your skeletal muscle. I feel like that's one, if you do that, you're probably good to go. And then you can lighten up on the rest.
Got it. Interesting. So it was a couple Sundays ago, now that the weather's warmed up, I jogged up to HQ to do deadlifts with a hex bar, and my back was so much more sore than when I used dumbbells at my normal gym. And I was like, that's weird. I must have really engaged more. So it's like literally the hex bar, and people Google it if you don't know what we're talking about, but it's a hexagonal shaped barbell so that you can stand in between the weight plates, and ergonomically it's better to do that kind of deadlift, right?
Yeah, and they say it's one of the safer ones to do because of the ergonomics.
Right.
But yeah, it's also engaging the muscles a little bit differently. You can load it up a little bit more because your grip's a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah, and I was like, I can't remember how much I put on there. They have the weights there that are like huge, and it makes it look like you're doing so much, even though some of them are like 5 pounds. So the whole thing was loaded up, but it was only, it's like 100 pounds or something. Okay. Anything else weight training wise before we move on to the next sort of fitness section here?
No, I think that's good.
All right. So 14ers, you have climbed a few of them at least, I think. And one amusing thing is during the summer, sometimes I'll bump into you and you're like, yeah, I just did longs this morning, came up, came down. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Like, that's a whole day for me. I really have to plan to do longs. But you're like, yeah, I was up and down in just a short amount of time. So can you talk about your interest in climbing 14ers, talk about some of the trips you've done up to longs, maybe a memorable one or something in the first time you went up?
Yeah, I've done longs a few times now. It's one of my favorite hikes. We live in Longmont, namesake, and it's 45 minutes from my front door, and I can be hiking. So I'm a morning person. I can roll out of bed at 3, be up hiking at 4 a.m. I didn't know what to expect. I was coming down and making really good time. I have a tendency to stop and talk to people. If I see someone that looks interesting or I'm at the top, when I hike a 14er, I tend to have a beer at the top just to celebrate it. So it'll be maybe 7 or 8 a.m. and I'm cracking a beer open, but I've already been hiking for several hours, so it seems appropriate. So that'll strike up some conversations, and I've had a lot of good conversations. The first time, I think the most memorable thing I've done on longs is the first time I went up, I was coming down and I looked at my time, which was a mistake. I wasn't going for a good time, but I realized, man, I can do this in less than 6 hours. That's a good time. So I started, and a habit of mine when I hike is I dump my water on the way down and I jog it out. No matter what hike I'm doing, I'm usually I like to try to jog it out and just to do that because I enjoy running. Well, this jog turned into a run, turned into almost a sprint coming out, where I know you've done longs and the lower part of the trail isn't very steep, but there's kind of a lot of rocks and ruts and things. So I'm running, just barreling out of there, I'm literally going to come down to within 30 seconds of 6 hours. So I'm just hauling. And I can't believe I didn't kill myself because it was a stupid pace that I was doing. But no, every time I've hiked it, I've really enjoyed it. I've done several other 14ers. I like them all. And really, I hike them not for the accomplishment of a 14er, but because they're popular, because they're over 14,000 feet, but they're enjoyable. It's a good, hard workout. I typically hike up with no headphones. When I'm hiking alone, I'm no headphones. I just get in my own head and I think, and it gives me hours of thought. And then when I'm hiking down, I tend to throw headphones in and jog it out, or at least hike it out with the headphones in, and just to kind of lose myself, because that's all. When you're hiking a 14er, it's all about the destination. You get to the top and then you're only halfway done, but you've already seen it all. So sometimes it's enjoyable to throw a podcast on. And I've mentioned this to you guys coming down from Long's Peak once. I put on your podcast and it's like I'm hiking out with you, because anytime I listen to your podcast, it's I could sit there and have a beer with you and just have all these conversations that I've always got feedback. I've always got something to say about whatever you guys are talking about. So it's kind of enjoyable to hike out listening, whether it's your podcast or an audiobook. That's kind of my method.
That's cool. And there's one summit that you did where you took sort of a non-traditional route up to Longs. Can you talk about that? Just because it's impressive. It's hard enough to walk up the normal fucking, the path you're supposed to go on. But you could go up many different ways, right? Yeah. So it's actually what's next for me is let's explore the different routes, because now I've discovered several that I want to do. The one you're referring to is going up. There's a hike called Chasm Lake, which is this beautiful lake that sits right below the Diamond on Long's Peak. So it's a more reasonable hike. It's still a hard hike. You get to high elevation, but it's probably half of doing Longs, if that. But you actually hike right past this lake, and then you go up this big trough and you go up Mount Meeker. So it's what I did is I summited Meeker, which is the slightly smaller mountain right in front of Long's Peak, and then you go across the saddle and you actually dip around back where I got lost, and there was some rock climbing involved that should not have been involved, and then some pathfinding that should not have been involved, because I kind of veered off the path, and it's not a popular route, so there wasn't anyone around to ask or lead me. So it took a little longer than expected, but popped out on, got up onto Long's Peak and then went down the traditional path. And that one was just a lot of fun. And I had plenty of time. There was no danger of being out too late or anything like that. So it was really enjoyable to do it in a different route. And again, with the accessibility, I love 14ers, but I'm not going to drive 2 or 3 hours to hike one. I'd rather let's go do longs and just explore the different routes. And even if you don't go to the summit, there's so many good hikes up there. It's worth it. And final question on longs here. Have you had to turn back? Sometimes it's exceedingly windy up there when you get over the ridge. It's super windy, and there's a couple spots. I mean, it's a huge mountain, so the wind and the air pressure and the weather is very volatile up there. Yep, and it's always windy. So the keyhole, if people are familiar with longs, the keyhole is always a wind tunnel, and anytime I get there, that's when you start feeling the wind. And I've been there on days with 30-mile-per-hour winds, and people are like, "Oh, it's too windy, I'm going to turn back," and I say, this is the least windy I've ever, 30 miles per hour. This is a calm day. So yeah, you're right. There's some pretty treacherous conditions that go on up there. And I have had to turn back, not for wind, but I tried a spring hike last year, and the backside of the mountain was completely covered in snow and ice still. And I had full crampons and an ice axe, and that was not enough to walk over the ice because the slope was so bad and there was no level ground. I couldn't even dig in my crampons.
So it took me about 30 minutes to go 30 feet or so. And at this point I was alone. There was no one around. If I slipped, I was going to go down 1,000 feet and, they'd have to dig out my body later. So I decided it was a really bad idea. And Jake 10 years ago probably would have pushed on, but now I've got kids, I'm older, I'm wiser, and I made the wise choice and turned around.
Yeah. What was the weather like down here in the valley, the foothills and stuff?
That day it was actually a pretty nice, ended up being a pretty nice day. It was still really early on a mountain when I was up there, but it was 60s, probably even 70 and sunny that day. So the weather turned out nice, but up there it was still windy. It was, 20 degrees and ice.
That's crazy. Yeah. I remember we actually tried to do Chasm, and I think it was like the middle of June. It was like 95 degrees down here, and there was still like the snow field to the approach, and it was like a little too much. So Elizabeth turned back, and then I started to go up there, and I thought it was just like 5 more minutes, but it was like 45 minutes. So after a while I turned back. So anyway, it's crazy how it's so different down here versus up in the mountains.
Yeah, it is.
So, okay.
Cool. So you have an Apple Watch. Do you pay attention to, I know you can get tons of data from that. Does that have HRV, heart rate variability data on there?
It does. I've recently got the Apple Watch. I've been running with Garmin for over 10 years and got the Apple Watch, and now I'm geeking out on all the data.
Nice. Can you explain what heart rate variability is?
Heart rate variability is the variability of your heart rate, of course, but the beats, it measures the time in between each beat of your heart. And let's say in that time between beats will vary, and the amount that the beats vary is important. And what they say is, actually, this is counterintuitive to me, because I would think you want your heart to beat at a very consistent rate. Actually, if the fitter you are, the better cardiovascular health you are in, your heart rate variability rises. So the time between beats changes more often, and they measure it in milliseconds. So the milliseconds in between heartbeats will change more often, and that means you're actually in a fitter state.
Okay. And do you pay attention? Does it measure Vo2 Max as well? Or?
It does. It actually doesn't do a great job from my experience. The Vo2 Max peaks at 60 for the Apple Watch. So mine has been pegged, and that's about the best you can get for an Apple Watch. That's the best you can get for an Apple Watch. And mine just stays right there. Meanwhile, if you go into a lab and do a Vo2 Max test, you can certainly exceed 60 up into the 70s, 80s. But the Apple Watch doesn't have enough technology in order to do that. So I would love to track mine, but it just stays right there at 60.
Okay. And just to back up a second, can you define Vo2 Max?
So Vo2 Max, I cannot define as well. I think Doug might be more prepared to define that.
Yeah, I looked this up earlier. So it shows how much oxygen your body absorbs and uses while working out. V is for volume and O2 is for oxygen. And it's typically measured in milliliters of oxygen consumed in a minute per kilogram of body weight. So essentially, higher Vo2 max is better. And one of the things I looked up also is sort of the average Vo2 max for men and women. And basically, they give us 3 ranges. And the sedentary this is for men, 35 to 40. And then an active is 42.5 to 46. And then very active is above, I guess, 40, we'll say 47 up to like 85. And the funny thing is, on my watch, it tells me that I am in the right in between the sedentary and active, which was slightly disappointing because I thought it was a little more active than that. And for women, just to make sure we hit that, the sedentary is 27 to 30, active is 33 to about 37, and then on up to about 77. So you're pegged out at as high as the Apple Watch will go. So Good problem to have, I guess.
Yeah, but conversely, I know I've seen some of your numbers, and your HRV, I think on average, is better than mine. It's something that we talked about. I had some concern when I first got the Apple Watch, and I saw my average HRV it's actually pretty low, both in waking and sleeping. But what I've discovered since then is what matters most, it appears, is what your HRV is when you wake up or when you're in a very calm state. And being as active as I am, constantly on the move, running, but I also bike all over town and everything. I wonder if that's part of why my average HRV is a little bit lower. So my waking is okay. It's not stellar. Yours is still, I think you have me beat there, but it's interesting. And that's one thing that I've been playing with and trying to watch.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the HRV. So, and it's kind of funny. So you're at the top for activity level in the Vo2 Max, and I'm doing pretty good with relaxing and just sitting around. That's what I excel at.
Honestly, I think there's probably some conflicting thing there where one could be higher than the other, and that may be part of it is activity level.
And have you done a Vo2 Max in a lab before?
I have not.
Okay.
But I am very interested in doing that. I've actually talked to someone that does it up in Fort Collins. She was in college, but doesn't do that anymore. They had a lab, and I would have loved to go in and do something like that.
Gotcha. How about like the, what do they call it? The DEXA scan where they do the body composite. Is that what it's called? DEXA? Have you done that?
I don't think that specific scan. I used to, when I was in college, we had some pre-med or, a group that in our rec center would do a full analysis and a little bit better than your average, stepping on a scale or whatever.
Sure.
And so I tracked that pretty much every semester through college, but not since then.
Okay. And yeah, I'm curious, Carl, do you have any, I know you have you don't have an Apple Watch. Do you have HRV or Vo2, any of the data like that?
I don't have any of that.
Okay. You got to join the club, man. Yep. You're missing out.
I know. I kind of want an Apple Watch. My resting heart rate is down to 64, which is the lowest it's been in a couple of years. I know nothing compared to you two, but...
Nice. What's yours at?
57, I think.
Okay.
Which I think yours is lower, right?
It is. I was going to say the other day mine got down to like 48.
Okay.
Or something like that.
The lowest reading I've seen is 43 on mine, but for the daily or nightly average or whatever, however it takes it, or waking average, I think is what I was looking at. It's 57.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So I'm very calm. Very calm. All right. Let's move on to your diet. So can you talk about sort of your eating habits? And I'm curious about any supplements you might take as well.
Yeah, supplements are quick, so I'll start there. I've taken various things over the years, and again, podcasts, I eat them up. So I'm always learning new things and kind of tweaking that. What I've really settled on and I've done for a while, I'm taking fish oil, vitamin D, and vitamin K on a normal basis. I also take creatine in I put a scoop of creatine in my smoothies with protein. Creatine's, 5 grams, I think is what they recommend on a daily amount. Fish oil's 2 to 4 grams, and then vitamin D, vitamin K. So those are my supplements.
Okay.
And that's kind of what I've fallen into.
And then before you talk about the food, so the creatine, I think we talked about before you started taking it, if I remember right. I could be wrong, but did you notice anything from taking the creatine, anything noticeable?
I thought so. And honestly, I've been taking it for a while now. Yeah. So it's more baseline. And I guess the one benchmark I would do is I'll go a week or two without taking it if I'm traveling or something like that. I don't travel with it. I travel with my fish oil and stuff, but not my creatine. And I definitely feel a difference when I go without it. But also when you're traveling, so many other things mess me up that I wouldn't account for, the creatine alone. So no, it's a cheap supplement, and it's the most researched supplement on the market. So I'm convinced that A, it's safe. B, a lot of the new research saying 5 grams a day is worth it. So I'm convinced, and it's costing me next to nothing to do. So I'll continue to take it.
Mm-hmm. And then, do you take it, Carl?
I have not started it yet.
Not yet. Okay, but you're thinking about it.
I am. I was going to pivot to that when I start doing more weight exercises.
Cool. All right, and I take what you said, 5 grams, but I don't know. It's fine.
And it's really a cognitive and mood thing, and that's what the 5 grams is really for. It's not really for the weight, weightlifting and water retention and stuff that bodybuilders are taking 20 to 30 plus grams. If you really want to, Carl, that's what you would want to do to make sure that your muscles look as big as possible, because then they start to retain more water and they just look big. So
that's what I needed. Yeah. I need that too. Okay. Well, and what about your diet?
So that's, I'd say on average, I have a very, very good diet. I really enjoy food, and anyone that knows me knows I can out eat a lot of people, especially for my size. It's kind of, I call it impressive. Other people have different names for it. But so when on a normal day, though, I intermittent fast. I don't eat until maybe 11:30 in the morning. I pack my lunch every day. I'm still going to work most days. So I pack my lunch. I eat the same. I've been eating the same lunch for years. It's super easy. I ate a salad with a bunch of vegetables on it. I eat overnight oats, which is the highlight of my day. I love my overnight oats. And then usually a couple pieces of fruit, or maybe I try to sneak some leftovers in, or something with some protein or some carbs, especially when I'm in heavy training like I am now, to try to just boost the calories and the healthy foods. But it's really predominantly whole foods. I got into that a couple years ago because my wife always experiments with these diets that are, I felt the same way as I did about yoga. I'm like, why are you always trying these different things? And like, just eat the food. But what I found was she did the whole food. I forget what it's called. There's a name for this whole food diet.
It's like Whole30 or
Whole30.
something.
Yeah. She did that a few years ago. And really what I found was, buying just all these fresh vegetables and meats and everything. We've always eaten our meat. We're not vegetarian or anything, but cooking with that, it turned out so much better. And I really enjoy the fresh foods now. And that's why we predominantly eat that way, because I love to cook and prepare our meals, and we'll cook a couple times a week and cook enough with leftovers. So that's why I started with supplements. I don't supplement a ton because I try to eat as much fruits and vegetables, mostly vegetables and meats and grains that I can. And that I feel like as long as I'm doing a good job of that, then I'm covering most of my basis.
How about guilty pleasure food? What kind of garbage do you eat?
Oh man, I could eat pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I love pizza. I make pizza. I make deep dish, and I just got a pan style recipe, pan crust recipe that I had at a friend's house, and it was amazing. So I'm going to start dabbling in the pan pizza now. Peanut butter is the guilty pleasure. In the past, I worked at a peanut butter plant, and I've always loved peanut butter. Even through college, I had a jar of peanut butter on my desk all the time.
Yeah.
And so at my peak, I was eating 2 pounds a week. In 1 week, I would go through 2 pounds of peanut butter. So I've since stepped that back a little, but that is still, I'm eating probably 2 to 3 servings a day of peanut butter easy. That's the guilty pleasure.
Do you get into almond butter much? It's so nutty. Like when I eat both, and I love peanut butter, but I started getting almond butter, and I'm like, man, it tastes like a nut should. And then you go back to peanut butter. If you do like side by side, peanut butter tastes like you're eating a bunch of beans, which I guess, they're legumes, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, do you get into almond butter or whatever?
I do, but my consumption rate, almond butter is kind of expensive, and peanut butter is a little cheaper. And I've always got peanut butter almost for free through my job. So I also eat a lot of mixed nuts, which are predominantly almonds. So to balance that, I'll eat the peanut butter.
I've been getting into pistachios lately. That's a good nut.
Yeah, they're good.
Yeah, underrated. I get them shelled and everything.
Oh, absolutely. And they're really good. I just had a salt and vinegar pistachios, which was interesting.
Those are great.
Yeah.
They have them at Sam's, right?
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Jamie picked them up somewhere, and they were pretty good.
Sounds good. What's your favorite nut? Doug, you first.
Well, right now, it changes all the time. But right now, pistachios. Yeah, I think they have a lot of protein and fiber. I don't know. I don't pay too much attention to that stuff, but I saw it on a headline once.
Yeah, that's hard for me. Pistachios are good. I actually, if I'm going to say, if I want a good healthy nut, the Brazil nuts I really enjoy them, and they're nice to snack on. But I just grab a handful of mixed nuts. I go to Sam's Club, I buy their big bin of mixed nuts, and I just throw the whole handful in. I don't have the patience to pick through and like eat one at a time. I just throw the whole handful in together.
Yeah, I got busted picking through. Elizabeth was like, you got to eat them all. Yeah. Like,
I agree.
Yeah.
Somehow all the cashews are always gone out on the mixed nuts. That's not okay. You got to go random. Just pull them out.
Yeah. What's your favorite nut, Carl?
I like pecans.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, or some people say pecans, right? What is the proper pronunciation, Doug?
I don't know. I think I usually say pecans.
Okay.
I say pecans. I don't know if that's correct. How do you say it?
Pecans, but if you're in the Midwest, I think it's pecans. You got to get a little more nasally, and I've heard it all different ways.
Yeah.
How is your sleep, Jake? And this is an interesting question because we both have a similar sleep struggle in that we both sleep very warm and we both have a chili pad to cool down the bed. But that aside, unless you want to talk about that more, how many hours do you sleep, and do you struggle with sleep at all?
I used to struggle with sleep, and then I had kids. So not only do kids just wear you out and make you sleep better, but I think in general, I had a lot more respect for sleep. And when I could get sleep and consistent sleep, I valued it a lot more. And also seeing, researching and, because I have to research everything, I research how to have a kid and, how to raise a kid. So hearing how important it is for them, but also for everyone, I really took it more seriously since I've got a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old. So it's been a while. And over the years, I've tried to get much better. The single best thing for my sleep has been the chili pad. So thank you for that, Carl. That has been the biggest turn of how I sleep because I'm a hot sleeper. Summer, winter, it doesn't matter. 60 degrees in my room in the winter and I still sleep hot. So that was instrumental. But I've focused over the years on getting better at my sleep, and I'm pretty regimented, as we have been for a long time in terms of bedtime, wake up time during the week, and even on the weekends, unless we have something going on, we're pretty consistent. For us to be in bed at 9:30 on a Saturday night is not uncommon. That's usual for us. So I've always done well on less sleep. I've always been a bad sleeper. I've always felt, previously I said sleep is for the weak just because I had no respect for it. I'll sleep when I die. And it's because I wake up 30 times in a night and I just toss and I turn. What I've realized is I think genetically I'm probably predispositioned for less sleep. 6 hours, I'm golden. Now my goal is always 7. If I'm in bed for 8 hours, I can't even do it. So my goal is always 7, but really that's probably 6 hours of quality sleep in that 7 hours. And I feel great. And that's what I've gone on for a couple of years now.
Okay. You said you researched how to have a kid. If you still have any questions about that, I can show you some movies that detail the process on how to produce a kid. Don't watch them at work though.
I'll get those later. Thanks. So speaking of sleep, though, the one thing that with my Apple Watch I've learned is my blood oxygen levels are low at night. So I'm 93. I'm averaging 93.7, and it's really consistent between right around there every single night for my blood oxygen. And I'm a mouth breather, so that's something I've always struggled with. And they say that leads to sleep apnea and sleep disruption, waking up, tossing and turning. So that's kind of my next goal. Is I've always known that's probably a reason I wake up a lot at night, but now with my blood oxygen being that low at night, I realize it really is an issue. So that's the next goal, is to start working on that.
Okay.
And I think you have a newer watch than mine. I don't think I have that data on my watch. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the switches from Garmin to Apple Watch. I've got a few reasons that I could talk about for a while, but the Apple Watch finally has a lot of the data that I was looking for, and a lot of the capability. Because when they first came out, even right now, the running app or the fitness app on the watch is I hate it. It's garbage. But I found a paid one that is amazing, and it gives me more data than I know what to do with. So that really overcame the fears of having the right running watch. But now it's got the blood oxygen, it's got EKG, it's got HRV, and all of those things that we were talking about.
Got it. All right. And similar, any morning or evening routines that you always follow?
Yep. And that's, part of the sleep. So we'll keep going on to sleep. I'll start with the evening instead of the morning. Evening, I've got kids, so they're in bed. Usually in bed, I read to them. We've got our whole evening routine I don't need to go into, but I get out of their room about 7:45. And I would love to do some work then. But anything I do, whether it's jumping on the computer or, going to the basement, doing some work on the house, anything like that, I can easily then stay up for the next 6 hours. I'm a morning person, but really when it comes down to it, if I'm working on something, I can stay up way too late. Yep. So I try not to get into too much. Usually I'm just prepping for my next day and kind of taking it easy. I'm not a TV person, so maybe I'm doing some meal prepping or cleaning up a little. But come 8:30, and sometimes I'm checking emails, checking the phone, things like that. But come 8:30, screens are off. I put my phone on the charger and kind of start winding down for bed, doing my last few things. And really by 8:45 or 9 o'clock, I'm in bed and I read until the book falls on my face. And then that's about time to put it down. And I know I've heard, don't read in bed. Don't do anything in bed except sleep. I don't follow that rule. I don't have any issue with reading in bed. I think it helps me fall asleep. It helps me kind of wind down for the day. And then I just set the book down, go to bed. morning routine right now isn't my ideal routine. I wake up about 4:30, 4:45, which is fine for me. I'm a morning person, but I work out right away. And that's because I prioritize working out, and I know if I wait until later in the day after work or anything, I may or may not get to it. So my number one priority is wake up, I work out, and then I'm done with that before the family wakes up. And that's not ideal. I'd rather work out mid-morning. But I do that, and then I get back, I take a quick shower, have coffee with the wife, I get my kids up and feed them breakfast, get them off to school. So that's my morning routine now. But not pertinent to specifics, but they're regimented, and every morning, every evening, they're the same.
Got it.
How do you maintain all these routines when you travel? You do travel a lot for your job and international travel as well. And I've always found it difficult myself when doing that to maintain a routine.
In short, travel destroys my routines. And especially 90% of my travel is international. So I'm going to Europe last year 10 times in a 6-month period. So it is the sleep schedule, it's destroyed. My eating habits, I'm eating out every day, and it's delicious European food, and I don't pay for it. So I eat to my heart's desire. Yeah. Every evening I'm having a couple beers or a couple glasses of wine, because honestly, when you're traveling for work, what else do you do? I'm not going to sit in a hotel and stare at a wall. So usually we're just hanging out in the evenings, and we'll, go grab a drink, and dinner will end up being late because it's Europe and you eat at 6, 7, 8 o'clock, 8, 9 o'clock in some countries. So, all of my habits are just wrecked. The one thing that I do is I make sure to wake up and I run every morning. So my 3 days a week turns into 6 or 7 days a week when I'm traveling, because I've always felt this way. When I'm traveling, I love my runs even more. It helps me keep me grounded, at least in some way. And waking up first thing and running in Europe is actually one of the ways I think it helps me transition from time zone to time zone. So I think that helps actually a lot, because I'm outside right in the morning, sun's rising. It helps, you guys listen to some of the same podcasts, so about you seeing sunlight first thing in the morning and everything, how important that is. So I think that does help get my body on that schedule. But other than that, my routine is destroyed.
Yeah, it's so tough, especially the sleep aspect. You're away from your chili pad,
right?
Obviously, tons of different things. You're just out of place, and that it always screws me up. Even if it's a comfortable room, sometimes I just can't sleep well, and it wrecks the rest of the time.
I don't sleep well as it is. Like I said, I've got a lot better, but typically I don't sleep well. And in hotels, it's been 20 times worse. Easy.
Yeah. So we're starting to wind down a little bit, and we have a note on intentional living, which is a very broad topic, and we'll kind of leave it open. So what matters to you?
Family is number one, family and health. And then just following my passions and staying engaged and staying active, both from a physical standpoint, but also active with my family, active mentally, and challenging myself. As an engineer, one of the reasons I'm an engineer is I grew up working with my hands, and loved math and science, did really well with that. But problem solving, I love to solve problems, and that's part of why I spend so much time researching projects. So I think between those things, that's what all comes together to form happipiness to me. And again, led by family, that's something that I really value, and I've been able to put myself in a better position recently. With my travel for work, it makes it tough, but I value waking up with a family and seeing them, and making sure I focus on the kids, and making sure I'm giving them the opportunities that they need, and raising them, because what I've learned is time is short. Probably won't have any more kids, and they're 5 and 6 years old, and I've probably got another every year. Every day is so much different, and they're always growing. So I don't want to miss out on this time, and hoping to be able to spend even more time with them in the future. And when they're 18 and out of the house, then things are going to change a lot. But right now, that's my priority.
What does your perfect day look like?
So I mentioned my morning's not ideal. Intermittent fasting, for example, I wake up, I run. This morning I ran 10 miles, and typically wouldn't eat until lunch still. And but luckily I grab some breakfast burritos. So that was helpful for this interview. Keeps me going.
Yeah, it was helpful for us too. Thank you for the burritos.
Thank you.
But I would rather wake up. I'd still get up probably 5 a.m. I'm a morning person. And being able to wake up and more relaxed, maybe check some emails, do some stuff on the computer. If we have dishes that we wash the night before, I put them away. That's just, to me, the mental clarity of not having clutter is important. Yeah. And even if I leave the house, I know those dishes are sitting there. Things like that and picking up after the kids, I think that's helpful. So I'd probably spend the first hour of my day kind of maybe, who knows, maybe I'm doing a 10 or 20 minute yoga every morning just to get that mental clarity. And being able to more relax in the morning, have coffee with the wife, get the kids off to school. And then maybe it's a couple hours of deep work, whether that's working on the house, working on a project on the computer. At this point, I'm saying I'm not going to a day job. So probably working on the house or doing some other project. Mid-morning workout, maybe 10 a.m. instead of 4:30 in the morning. So at 10 a.m. I can work out and then I can eat more immediately. And I think that would help with some of the fatigue issues that I have sometimes. And then a couple more hours of work and then get the kids home and focus the entire afternoon on the kids and the family. And that's more my ideal day. I think our evenings are great. We eat dinner early. We eat dinner 5:30, go for a walk after dinner, spend some time at the park, whatever, get the kids to bed, and then still wind down about the same way.
Cool. Very good. Well, is there anything else that we didn't ask you that you want to talk about? Any random points? You can go back to something or anything like that. Just want to make sure.
No, I don't think so. I told you before this, I think all these topics I could talk on for hours, and this is the kind of stuff that I'm passionate about. I really enjoy it. So I don't know if there's any, I know you guys had some plans and some notes, if there's anything that you were trying to tee me up for that I didn't talk about, but I'm pretty happy with it.
I'm happy too. I was going to say, I know we've talked on hikes for a really long time, and we've traveled to some conferences and stuff together. So we've had like long conversations about like half of these things. So it's cool to share it. And, one thing we didn't talk about at all, you lightly alluded to your love of beer. In traveling, you're able to have a lot of different stuff. And I think, we could do a whole show, number one, where we talk about beer, but we actually could drink beer and stuff. So maybe a round two, but we could figure out the right time to do it and, have Mile High Fi after dark kind of thing going on.
I'm up for that. Yeah. And to elaborate on the beer, we talked about travel, we've talked about my work, a lot of things. And, next week I'm going out to Napa for my 10-year anniversary, which was last year, and I had to skip that because I was in Europe for work. So we're going out to Napa, and I will come home with a suitcase full of alcohol, but it's all going to be Russian River beers, not any wine. So we can enjoy that maybe. Right. But also a good story. When I travel to Europe, I stay up all night on the plane because I can't sleep on a plane. And then I land usually 8 a.m. in Europe, and I stay up all day. And I'm insistent on staying up all day because if I nap, I'm done for the evening. I'll never fall asleep. So I have once, I hit the ground in Europe, jumped in a rental car, dropped some people off at the hotel that I was traveling with, and drove 3 hours into Belgium to buy Westvleteren 12. So stopped for lunch and then got to the St. Sixtus Abbey where they brew it and sell it, the only place they sell it. So that I drove 3 hours just to go buy beer, bought a bunch and packed it in my bag and flew it back to the U.S. with me.
That's awesome. Sounds like something I'd do. Very good. Well, you're pretty much under the radar, but where could people find you if you want to mention any place?
I don't do a whole lot of social media. I do have a Twitter handle, Phi Dilettante. And so you could try to reach out on there, message me or ping me there. Also, if someone really wanted to get in touch, feel free to email Carl or Doug, and you guys can share my email with them. I have no issues there.
And we're all going to be at week 2 of Camp FI Rocky Mountain, which may be sold out, but if anyone wants to continue this conversation, or hit Jake up for good beer.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot. Yeah, week 2, we're all going down. Yep. It's going to be awesome. Well, Jake, this has been amazing. Thanks so much for joining us. And we're excited to have you on again.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the show. That was the Mile High Fi podcast, and I'm Doug Cunnington, the Balder host, and Carl Jensen is the cool, sexy one. If you dig the show, please do 3 things for us. Number 1, tell a friend, a family member, an enemy about the show. We really don't care who you tell. Maybe forward them a specific show that you know that they will like. It's the single most helpful thing that you can do to spread the word. It's like giving us a virtual high five, and actually we don't give high fives in person, so the virtual kind's pretty good. And more importantly, your friend or family member or even your enemy will appreciate the fact that you were thinking of them. Number 2, make sure you're following or subscribed on your podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, YouTube, whatever you're using, and that way you won't miss a show. And number 3, please leave us a rating and review. We read them on the show occasionally, and you might hear yours out there on an upcoming episode. Quick disclaimer, this show is not financial or legal advice. I'd actually be surprised if it sounded like it. It's really just for entertainment, and that's at least what we're hoping for. But seriously, get advice from professionals. Carl and I are just 2 guys with microphones that sit in my basement and talk. So we'll catch y'all next week. Jake, if I remember right, you recently ran a half marathon?
Yes.
How'd it go?
It went really well. I was happy with it. I wasn't happy with the race itself. It was not a very well put on race, but I ran my best time of running a half, so I was pretty happy with that, and it gets me excited for a couple more races I've got planned.
Do you care to share what your time was?
1:22:15.
Damn.
That's pretty good. Doug, I ran one pretty close to that time, plus or minus an hour, mostly close. So.
Yeah. What were you going for a specific time or anything, or you were just trying to do better than you did before?
Yeah, I wasn't going for a specific time. It's more of a gauge of where I'm at right now, and I'm actually training for a full marathon. I've never run a full, so this was kind of that halfway point to gauge my marathon training. I was happy with the time because of that. It puts me on pace to hopefully reach my goal in a full, but we'll see about that.
Cool. Carl, you said you have run a half though, right?
Yes, I have.
How did you enjoy it? Did you only run one?
I only ran one. It was one of the most miserable experiences of my life. I downloaded a training regimen and did it really like I stuck to it. I did the whole 3 months, and at the end you're running like 11 miles. You never run the full half marathon in the training, but you approach it. And in the past, I've had this thing called IT band syndrome, where your IT band on the anterior part of your leg tightens up and it hurts like hell. It doesn't do any damage supposedly, but it really hurts. And this didn't affect me at all. In my whole training, I would do the stretching, and then I get to the half marathon. And about halfway through, my IT band just starts screaming. I'm like, oh my God, it hurts so bad. Like when it's bad, you can barely walk. The pain is so intense. And it never got that bad, but probably every quarter mile after that, I had to stop and stretch. So my time was bad, and it was a pretty miserable experience.
Oh man, that sucks. Yeah. But at least you finished.
I did.
All right. And I've run some half marathons. I love it, but my Achilles is hurt. So,
Yep.
Okay.